Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's stream. We're going to be building a web portfolio using HTML and CSS. I hope you all have been having a great Global Hack Week so far. Super excited to be back here for Beginners Week in the new year. So a little bit of an overview of what we'll be doing throughout this stream. First off, we'll do an introduction onto portfolios, why they're needed, kind of what you should be considering when making a portfolio. And then secondly, we'll dive into designing a portfolio, talking through kind of how to have a strategy, what different things you should be considering, and then also walking through a brief Figma prototyping session. We'll design out a sample portfolio. And at the end, we'll hop into Replit so we can do a code along for our portfolio and kind of show you what a sample portfolio could look like. And at the end, we'll be sharing these slides as well as the code. So I'd love to hear how everyone's Global Hack Week is going so far. Feel free to drop that in the chat, but we'll be getting started. So a little bit about me. My name is Gabriella. I'm a coach here at Major League Hacking, and my focus has been primarily in front-end development and data science. So that's kind of what I'll be focusing on for the sample portfolio that I'm building today. But you can kind of tailor this to whatever your experience is, or if you're kind of starting off as a beginner, you can kind of see what to look for in making your own portfolio. So you might be asking yourself, why, are you interested in building a portfolio? Why should I build one of these? There's a lot of different reasons. I'm just going to highlight three very quickly. So first of all is freelancing. So if you're looking to make some side income or are in university and kind of looking to gain some experience, freelancing is a great way to do this. And you can do this by compiling a bunch of projects in a portfolio to show kind of commonalities in your skill sets, the different things you're capable of, different things you've done in the past. And this can be a great way to kind of gain clients and connections for freelance development work, which is a great way to build upon your skills and potentially find a full-time gig in the future if that's what you're looking for. But also a lot of people will do kind of freelance development as their full-time job if they gain a wide enough array of clients or work. Another reason you might want to build a portfolio is if you're interested in kind of developing your career and progressing, keeping an up-to-date repository, which is kind of what I'll be calling this portfolio. It can also mean a GitHub repository. All your work, all the side projects, all the things you've been doing is kind of a great way to see any gaps in where your current career has been. So if you compile everything together and you realize you haven't done many projects in a certain area, or your projects seem to be lacking in a certain subset of your tech stack, it might be a good way to realize that you need to work on that. And this is also a great way to kind of make connections with people who are working on similar projects. So you might find potential collaborators for hackathons, or if you're looking to do entrepreneurial type things, this is a great way to kind of connect with other developers or potential founders and kind of progress your career in that way. And then also, you can use portfolios as a great way to showcase the knowledge you've gained and your progress. So this can be kind of two-faceted, both for gaining employment, but also just to kind of reflect personally and see how far you've come as a developer and throughout your technical journey. So if you compile all your projects and kind of reflect on them within your portfolio, you can see a lot of your progress and your successes, also your failures, and gain a pretty good reflection point of where you want to go in the future and maybe what you're proud of from your past. If anyone's I guess has a particular reason on why they're interested in building a portfolio, feel free to drop that in the comments. I'd love to hear about why everyone else is interested in building a portfolio and what you're hoping to gain from that. So kind of diving into what what you should be considering when building a portfolio. There's 4 key questions you want to ask yourself. So the first is, what is my goal? And this is where you want to kind of decide on what you want your portfolio to achieve and kind of keep this focus in, because it can be very easy, especially with tech, to kind of have a bunch of focuses. And when you lose, I guess, a key or 2 key focuses, it can be hard to follow a story if you have a bunch of different things kind of going on concurrently and there's not very a common thread line throughout them. So some example goals you might have is if you're looking for a new job in X field within technology. Another one would be gaining 3 new web development clients And a third goal might be building a developer relations brand, if that's a field you're looking to get into. And the second question to ask after you've decided on a goal is, who's my audience? So based off of this, like your goal, you need to hone in on who your target audience would be in order to achieve this goal. So, excuse me, you're looking for a new job in a particular field, then you're likely going to want to target recruiters or people who are engineers in that field and might be able to assist you in finding a new job in that field. If you're looking to gain 3 new web development clients, you might be targeting founders, like product managers who are building out a product and need something quick for their team, or potentially even small businesses who don't need to hire out an entire like technology team for their company, but just need like one specific thing built for them. And if you're interested in building out a developer relation brand, your audience might be broader and need to kind of like have different focuses based on that. It might include many of these people that I listed under like the example audiences, but it might include people outside the scope as well. As far as like how, like what you want to ask next is how can you like specifically tailor this portfolio to your audience? So once you've decided on a job and an audience, you kind of want to think through the unique needs as well as like the knowledge background that your audience would have. So if your audience is primarily engineers, you won't need to like as clearly explain everything in your tech stack because your primary audience will already have some familiarity with it and won't need kind of the same level of explanation. But if you have an audience or a target audience that isn't as technical, you might need to have some additional kind of like explanation and dive a little bit deeper into the technology while still kind of like having clear communication. And you need to kind of like when you're thinking about how to tailor your portfolio to your audience, really consider what you need to incorporate in order to meet these needs outside of just the projects you're building and kind of like your about page. But like what specifically for the features and the copy on the website, like you need to kind of focus in on and maybe adjust to meet your current goal and your current target audience. And after you kind of figured out what's your goal, what's like who's my audience, and like how do I tailor this portfolio to meet my audience, you'll need to decide on what content you need to include. If you've been in tech for a while, or even if you're a beginner, you might have like a significant amount of things to show, have like a lot of different projects you've worked on or events you've gone to. This happens like as you've like spend more time on it, and you'll need to be a little bit more choosy about what you include in a portfolio. And you need to make sure that it aligns with your goals and your audience, and also like tailoring like how you display this different content to your audience to make sure that it makes sense and is achieving your goal and kind of follows that through line story point of like what you're trying to achieve and your experience as a developer or whatever other type of role you're looking to kind of gain, or whatever your goal is for your portfolio. So based off of this, I'm going to like run through a sample case scenario. This is more tailored to my experience. So if my goal is to find a new job in data science with a focus on products, as I find that I enjoy roles that kind of incorporate both technical as well as technical aspects, as well as kind of like the higher level design and like strategy thinking. So ideally, I'd be looking for a role that kind of combines those two. So based off of this goal, my audience would be people like recruiters, founders, managers, people who can guide you to a new job in data science, maybe guide you to a role that fits like your like desired role, as well as navigating through like different company cultures as well. And in this specific instance, how I think you would tailor a portfolio to an audience would be to focus on clear communication as well as site usability, because in this particular instance, you have a wider audience than just developers or recruiters. So you want to make sure that all of your technical projects have like a very clear and easy to understand explanation. And you're also able to navigate the site regardless of how much technical knowledge you have. Whether it be you're able to quickly click on GitHub links, or you have a brief explanation that is easy to understand. This could really enhance your portfolio and make it a lot easier to read for a like wide variety of people. And as far as like what content I think would be useful to include for this particular use case would be data science projects, technical communication projects to kind of highlight those skills, Any previous experience you might have in different roles that are relevant to this goal, or you can kind of like show the transferable skills from those like maybe less relevant roles, as well as any contact information or kind of like a call to action. So if you're looking for people to contact you about jobs, then you'd have that information. Or if you're looking to build out kind of like a client roster, you'd have a contact form to reach out to you about kind of like the potential specs of like what they're looking for. And the timelines, you're able to compile that very easily. And it's not just a lot of content with like no, I guess, like end purpose, or it's not like just like a bunch of content, if that makes sense. I'm going to look through the questions real quick. Looks like I missed a few. Someone asked, what about those who are in other tech roles like IT support? I think this would like the content here is also like transferable. I'm just focusing on my previous experience with development. But if you're in a different tech role, you're able to also make a portfolio. You just kind of like guide your experience and your projects to fit like into this portfolio. So based on like your goals and who your potential audience would be, you would just map it to your experience in IT support or whatever other role you're looking at. All right. So now we're going to move on to how to select portfolio content. So first you would do, what you're going to do is compile all your old projects. You don't necessarily need to be that choosy at this stage. Just compile all your old projects, all your old experiences that might possibly have anything to do with the overall goal of your portfolio. And after you've listed everything out, this could take a little bit of time if you don't have that many that are relevant, or you're still kind of a beginner in gaining experience, or it could take a pretty long time if you have a lot of different projects and you've been doing this for a while. But once that's done, you're going to move into the second stage, which is ranking your projects. And this will make it a lot easier to kind of decide on like what content to select. I know in the past I've kind of had trouble selecting them because they all have kind of like trade-offs, pros and cons to everything. And when there's like a lot of content, it can be overwhelming to the user on the website if you have too many projects and they aren't, I guess, like work that's super recent or work that you're super proud of. So when you're ranking these projects, this will help you kind of decide between those. And you want to give all of your projects like a ranking on a scale of 1 to 4 in these following areas. They might be different criteria based on your particular tech stack or what you're looking to do. But I think these are pretty ambiguous and can be applied to like a lot of different tech stacks and tech fields. So first is the relevance to goals. So in my instance, it would be how relevant is it to the field of data science? And secondly, how recent is this project? A lot of times, if your project is more recent, that's a good sign because it kind of shows what your up-to-date skills are. And it also demonstrates that these skills haven't gotten like rusty over like a few years in between like when you've built it and like when you're compiling the portfolio. Third, I focus on quality. This is kind of like how proud you are of the project, how well you think the project was executed. And this can kind of vary depending on your skill level. So something that's like a high quality for a beginner is obviously not going to be the same level of project as someone who's been working in industry for 10 years and is looking at like a high quality for like their experience level. So kind of like keep that in mind when you're going through and ranking your projects. Don't be too hard on yourself, especially if you're just getting into tech. And kind of the last category for ranking your projects would be how unique is it? Like what does it add to your portfolio? It's great to make like a data web like a data visualization dashboard. But if you have kind of like the same thing over and over again, and there's nothing really unique about like 5 of these projects, you don't want to include all of them because it doesn't really add anything new to your portfolio. If you have kind of like a similar thing for all 5, but one might be good to include, and then you can find other projects or build out other projects in order to like have a bunch of different things to talk about. And if there's more like uniqueness in all of your projects, that provides more of an opportunity for people to kind of grasp onto something and find something they're interested in when they're talking to you. I found that when I did this and I included 3 different projects in my resume when I didn't have that many experiences, that different recruiters as well as different engineers found like interest in different things based on kind of the content of the project rather than like the technology itself. I did one that was like visualizing data on movies, and I found that a lot of recruiters were super interested in that. And a different one where I was looking into kind of like university education data, specifically related to technology, and I found that a lot more engineers were interested in that particular project. So having a wider variety and more like uniqueness in your different projects can allow for like a lot more interesting conversations when you're going through a recruiting process or just kind of like talking to different people in industry, or maybe looking for a mentor or something like that. So once you've gone through all of these projects and you have them ranked from a scale of 1 to 4 in all these areas, you're going to add up kind of like the sum of the score in each 4 of these areas. So you'll get a score from either 4 to 16 in every single one. And out of these, you want to select the top 5 to 7 projects for your portfolio. If you're just getting started, 5 to 7 might feel like a lot, but you can always build more and kind of like add more as you go along. But I feel like this is a pretty good number for websites. It's not enough to overwhelm people if you format it right, but it's also enough to kind of show like a wide variety of skills and kind of show a good breadth of what you're able to accomplish. And also, if you find that the projects at the top 5 or top 7 are very similar, kind of like I mentioned earlier, 5 projects that are essentially doing the same thing, but just with different data, or something that's transferable to your particular tech stack, you might want to pull in a lower ranked project to add a little bit of diversity to your projects, to add a little bit more of like that conversation factor. But you, I guess, like want to be cognizant of like the quality and like how like long it's been. So that kind of goes like case by case when you're selecting this portfolio content. Someone said 7 projects is a lot. It is a lot, but I think like if you're a more experienced engineer, like that's like a solid amount of projects. You don't necessarily have to include that many, but if you just like want to have like a lot of things to talk about and have it be fully built out. And as you build new ones, you can of course swap them out. So your top 5 or to top 7 can kind of rotate. And I do kind of want to touch back on a little bit more of the logic behind how I decided to rank projects. I didn't choose like a number 1 to 4 arbitrarily. I did that because it forces you to kind of choose if you think it's very good to like not so good. Whereas like when you do 1 through 5, like you can oftentimes, if you're unsure, decide on 3, which can lead to like a lot of indecision when like ranking things and make it difficult to decide. This forces you to like make a decision essentially about the projects. So as far as kind of like compiling all the different projects, I'm going to do this for my example. My example portfolio, as you can see, there's a lot of different things listed out here. The old school, data feminism, neurosci, the Bechdel test, data contextualization toolkit, spot research, RJI interviews, and Global Hack Week workshops. I will go through a few of these in a little bit, but the top 4, I guess the old school, neurosci, and the Bechdel test are all data visualization projects. Data feminism and the data contextualization toolkit kind of combines my knowledge of cleaning data with providing context and information surrounding potential visualizations and data sets like to a non-technical audience, and kind of like how you go about communicating that. The spot research is research I'm doing with a spot robot on campus. We're essentially taking characters and we're using object character recognition to recognize those characters on campus signs. And then I've also done interviews for a variety of different professionals. They kind of like this shows a bunch of different skills and will show kind of like a variety of like what I'm looking for this goal of a role in data science that's focused on product. Someone just asked, I'm wondering what the minimum amount of projects for beginners to have even in a portfolio. I don't think there's necessarily a minimum. If you just have one and you want to start making a portfolio, I don't see anything wrong with just adding the one you have, and then kind of as you build more, you can add them as you go along. I was just kind of going off of like what you would see for like a fully fleshed out portfolio. And if you're being like very strategic about like meeting these goals, like in a like set timeline. But I think that it's totally fine if you only have 1 or 2 projects to put those up onto a website and then just kind of add more as you gain more experience, build more projects. And if you do have team projects that you've worked on in the past, I think like those are fine to include as well, as long as you can talk about like what you built on them, and kind of like what you contributed. So as far as ranking, I'm going to go through and rank everything. So give me 1 moment to pull up a page where I can actually edit this. I exported the slides, so I'll need to pull it up in an area where I can edit them. All right. Okay, so I'm able to edit here, but first I'm going to kind of walk through some of these projects to give you an idea of what essentially like we're talking about, so you can have like more of an idea. Okay, it looks like it just switched. So as far as this project, this was a hackathon project. Okay. Very quickly, going to move. Okay. Now you should see my dev post page. This is the Data Feminism project. So this one was a project I did based on the Data Feminism book, which kind of talks about how data needs different contexts and like how you would go about visualization while adding context for different sets of data that you might not have like the full scope of everything. So you might want to ask more questions and add kind of like additional context to show kind of like the full scope as well as kind of like the pitfalls of a data set. This was a group project I worked on for a hackathon. We have a bunch of different like additional graphs and the context we provided, as well as like the information we like parse through for like the theory behind data feminism and like this particular book. The next neurosite was a hackathon project I did. This was also a group project. This is where we like rebuilt out like a education platform, essentially. So if you've ever worked with like something like Canva or Moodle, sometimes it like isn't the best like experience. There's like a lot of improvements that can be made. So we like went through and made a bunch of improvements to this website. What I did was make kind of like a reimagined grade and like test score like data section, which kind of like plotted the different information against scores. So like how many times you'd attended class, like the total like amount of time spent studying, the amount of time spent like on like the class application. And I made a Python script to generate kind of like random intervals of this information, like sample test scores and sample like time spent in class, time spent on like the application. And then I'm going to show the data contextualization. No, that doesn't have a link. I just realized that all of the ones that I linked were group projects. And this is the one I talked about earlier. that was like movie movie data visualization. So here we can see kind of like the grossing amount of movies and like per year versus the like amount of movies that pass the Bechdel test, which if you're unfamiliar is a test that essentially sees if in a piece of media there are two women who are talking together, like having a conversation about something besides a man. It's like a pretty like low bar for female representation in film, but it was like what this data set had, and we graphed like the percent of movies that passed that test in a given year against like how much like the budget was, as well as like how much like the movies were grossing. Like this was kind of interesting, and we could kind of see it like it go up and down, but like relatively stay stay the same over time. And as far as my other projects, the data contextualization toolkit was a list of questions I had for journalists who were going through sets of data before publishing. This was really interesting because I got to combine my knowledge of like cleaning data and like what I would like look for like missing variables, or like a small data set, or a data set that like maybe doesn't have a very great sample size, or maybe an diverse sample size, and how journalists who like don't have a technical background could use that knowledge to maybe provide better information. All right. So I'm going to move back to the ranking section now that I gave a little bit of an overview of this, and we'll quickly go through some ranking. So as far as the old school project I did, the relevance I would say is about a 3. It wasn't too recent. I would give that a 2. The quality, I would give that a 3. And the uniqueness, I would give that also a 3. For the data feminism project, I would give that relevance a 3 because it's not super technical, but still is related to kind of data and like my communication skills. That was very not recent. I would say the quality was probably also a 3. It was pretty unique. For the neuroscience project, I would say that's very relevant. Was not very recent. I would say the quality would also be like a 4. I would make that like the uniqueness about a 3. Bechdel test, I would give the relevance probably about a 2. It wasn't too complex. Recentness was also 1. That was a while ago. The quality, I would say about a 3, and it was pretty unique. For the data contextualization toolkit, I would say the relevance would be a 4. It was relatively recent, and I'd say the quality was also pretty good, but could be improved, so I'd give that a 3. And I'd say it's very unique compared to like other portfolios and kind of the field in general. The spot research is very relevant. That's a 4. It's very recent. I'm still working on that today, actually. And I'd say that the quality is a 3 so far, but I'm hoping to get up to a 4 before I finish. And I'd say the uniqueness is probably also a 3. So I'm going to quickly sum these. Here we have 11. Also 11. Here we have 12. This one would be 10. 14. And then this one would also be a 14. So based off of this, we see that the data contextualization toolkit should be included, spot research should be included, and then I'll continue on to my shorter second page before kind of like summing up the 5 projects we're going to highlight. So these are different interviews I did when I was working like on the journalism project. I did one interviewing someone who contextualized health data. I did one with a data journalist at the Marshall Project, which focuses on criminal justice data. And then I also have a web development workshop for my time here at MLH at Global Hack Week, and then finally an open source education workshop. I would say the relevance for the health data interview was probably a 3. I'd say the same for the Marshall Project. For the web development workshop, I wouldn't say that was as relevant because of like the targeted goal of data science. So I would give this relevance maybe like a 2 because it might show my ability to communicate technical concepts, but it's not super relevant to data science. And I think I would do a 1 for the relevance of open source education. For how recent, I would give the health data interview 1. That's like not too recent. I give that a 2. The Marshall Project wasn't recent either. The web development workshop, I've done those pretty recently. That would be a 4. Open source and education is also relatively recent. Quality, I would say the quality of the health data interview was a 4. 3 for the Marshall Project. I'd say a 3 for web dev. That could definitely be improved. I'd say a 4 for open source education. I was pretty proud of that one. Uniqueness, I would say that health data and the Marshall Project were both pretty unique. Web development, I wouldn't say that one's too unique. A lot of people do web dev workshops. And open source and education, I think that one's pretty unique as well. So summing these up, we have 13, 12, 10, and then 13. So here we see that the health data interview and open source education are both winning on this page. So I'm going to go back to the first page and see like what is like ranked highly over here. So here the highest ranked after the 2 14s would be Neurosite. That's at a 12, like the other 2 on the page, followed by Old School and Data Feminism. I think I'm going to choose the Marshall Project just because I think it shows, I don't know. I'm going to, I withdraw that. I think I'm going to do the Bechdel test, even though it's ranked a little bit lower, because that shows my data visualization tools and data visualization skills in a way that the other projects I selected didn't. Like I mentioned earlier, choosing projects that maybe aren't ranked higher, but added aspect of uniqueness or something that other projects don't, I think is a good idea sometimes. All right, so based off of this, I'm going to select the winners really quick. So first, we have Spot Research. We have the Data Context Toolkit. And the Bechdel test, as well as the health data interview, and open source and education. All right, now that we have selected the winners or the projects that you'll be using for your portfolio, the next thing you want to focus on is selecting the copy and kind of like writing out the additional verbiage you'll be using in your portfolio. So earlier, some people talked about making an additional About Me page. I think that's a great idea. And you can like talk through your previous experiences on that. You can kind of combine your resume or experience with your About page, showing both your personality as well as your professional experience. But I think that kind of wording it in a certain way and having it flow as like a story point or like as a common storyline is important, and also making the copy and the contact page or like the context like text below or icons is really important to create while you're prototyping out the application, because then you can kind of just copy and paste that copy into your website rather than writing it while you're coding. All right, so we're going to move over to Figma, where I'll like talk through writing this additional copy. I apologize. There seemed to be a little bit of a lag on my computer. Um, so if the screens are moving a little bit slow, that's why. My apologies. Okay, here we go. My screen is fully frozen. If y'all can still hear me, I'm going to restart my computer and be back on in like 1 minute or as soon as possible. So sorry for the technical issues. All right, we're back. My screen is no longer frozen. My apologies for that. I don't know what was quite going on my computer. So let's speed run all of these to get back to where we were. I talked about creating additional copy, and I'll show you some examples of those before we go into writing our own and quickly like mapping it out on Figma. So here are 3 different portfolio examples. They're all pretty different, but kind of like show you like when you're looking to do different things and you have different experiences, you can highlight those in different ways. And also the amount of time and like the technology you spend building out your portfolio and using different things can kind of vary depending on your experience and what you've done. So here is the first one. This is Leffen's portfolio. They're a front-end web developer and designer. Clearly very experienced. This is like very well designed, but also because they're working on a front-end web development, you'd expect a portfolio to look like clean. And as you scroll throughout, you can see projects that are really recent, as well as older projects, and like even further back, there's a whole page with like a lot of extra websites. This is very like advanced and pretty like well built out, and holds like a lot more information than you might see on your typical portfolio. I think this is very well designed. I really like this portfolio. And if you click on this, it goes directly to the product. This is a shipped product for Watershed, which is a sustainability company. This is remapping infrastructure. This has like a write-up about it. If it's not like already shipped, you can do something similar on your portfolio. So people are interested in the project. They can read more about it, learn more about like what you did. So this is very thorough, has images to kind of go along with their project, which I think is really cool, as well as kind of like some context and linking at the bottom. I think that's really good as well. I'm not going to go through all the projects because there's a lot, but in addition, you can see that they have a bio about like kind of like previous experience, also kind of like imbuing previous personality of like who you are as a person, and a link to a resume, which includes kind of like standard resume stuff. Any like social media that's like quote unquote professional, something like Twitter, GitHub. You can include your LinkedIn here. Education, as well as projects or experience in different years. I think this is really well built out, but something like this will take a lot of time, and you'll need to be like pretty experienced to have something like this. So the next one I'm going to move on to is Alexis's portfolio. Alexis is also a front-end web developer, but in addition to that, she focuses a lot on using technology for social good, and does a lot of press and interview like related things. So as you can see, there's a link to kind of like her main project, which is PBR resources, or PB resources, which has like a lot of information for different activism and social justice related projects and issues, like education, taking action, and like different hubs. It's really easy to navigate, and seeing like the direct link to a deployed site is cool to see. And then in addition, you have like the about. So here you can see kind of like a backstory about Alexis, things she's done, as well as like images from these different projects and kind of like what she's working on now. And then for someone who does more kind of like press release things, or like you have like more kind of like links that you can show. This shows like a lot of those, and it's cool to be able to kind of go out and see things from like mainstream resources, or if like you don't have this, you just like have a blog where you've been featured on someone's podcast or like a student publication, you could link that as well. So I think this is pretty cool, and it's like really simple, so like it's easy to navigate on mobile as well, which is something you definitely want to consider when you're building out a portfolio. And then finally, we're going to look at Kat's portfolio. So Kat works as a software engineer and just like has her portfolio just like listed out as like a narrative. There's not very many like write-ups about particular projects, but there's links to them. So we have links to different companies she's interned at, different like extracurricular activities she was involved in when going through her undergrad. I'm just realizing I did not refresh. This is also pretty text heavy, but I think it really depends on what you're looking for. I think like the links is not a bad idea, and it really holds someone's attention to have like just like a bio that's kind of just like a short like overview of the things you've done with like links out to them. There's like links to YouTube videos, different websites, as well as like different things like GitHub, Twitter, and like a writing section as well. So this is like a lot more personal. It doesn't focus too much on projects, but I think could be like a good existing portfolio if you're looking to just have something up like while you're kind of like pretty content with like where you are professionally and like not looking to do like a lot of things. As far as like outreach, I think this is like a good kind of like standard portfolio or website. All right, so now that like we've gone through a few different sample ones, I'm going to walk through prototyping out a sample portfolio in Figma. And I will refresh the page. So first thing I'm going to do is just like make a frame. We'll do just like the standard desktop. And I like to have my websites be pretty simplistic. So something kind of like a middle ground between the website we saw with Alexis and Lachlan. I like to have color in my website. I like to add emojis, but I don't like to have just like a ton of CSS on the page. I think that it's easier to kind of make for mobile, and like with the ones that are more design heavy, it'd be a good idea to use something like React. This tool is Figma. It's a free prototyping tool for design. So yes. First thing I'm going to do is write out my name. We'll bold that and make the text a little bit bigger, maybe like a 50, because we want it to take up a good amount of space. The text font, enter. I think I'm going to leave it at that and then cross-verify that this font or a similar one is available on Google Fonts to make sure that I can actually execute this using code. And then after that, I'm going to make a few navigation pages. So something like about, I think is a good idea. And you can just link this to your bio. This will be a little bit smaller. We'll make this like 25, and I'm not going to bold that. On the desktop, I think it can just be over to the right. But on mobile, you want to have a plan for how you execute this so you're able to access it on mobile with how many people are accessing projects online. And then outside of this, I just think that a contact page would be good. In my particular case, I think what's best is to have the projects front and center, because that's what I want to highlight. And I want to do this in a way that's simplistic but still catches your eye. And I think the best way to do this is to include images when possible of the project. So I'm going to copy over some images I've taken of the top highlights that we decided on earlier. So the first thing we're going to do is the data contextualization toolkit. So as you can kind of see, it's a little bit small, but I'll zoom in. This just has like a lot of questions about like the data and like how you would contextualize it, or maybe decide not to use it if it doesn't have the proper information. This will blend in a little bit to the background because it has a white background as well. I might add a border but I'm going to see what it looks like with the other pictures first. Next, I'm copying in an image of my open source and education stream through Global Hack Week. Some of you might remember that if you were there. I make this, I actually think that's a pretty good size. I'll just make this one a little bigger to match. Perfect, okay. And then the next project is the Bechtel test. So I'm gonna go grab a quick screenshot of that, but I'm going to make sure that I delete my tab so my computer doesn't get mad and freeze again. I'm using Figma to prototype out right now. I'm just using a design file. And as far as good resources for learning Figma, I don't think there's any like substitute, just kind of like testing it out, spending some time in the application. But if you're curious about the application in general, there's like a lot of online tutorials through things like YouTube or even like the Figma website. They have like a good wealth of like templates and like design toolkits that are made by UX designers, which I find to be pretty helpful. All right, I have my Bechtel test image. This is copied in. It's a little bit odd of a shape compared to everything, but I'm just going to compile everything and then we can kind of unify it later. The next thing we have is my interview on health data. I don't have a great picture for this one, I'm not going to lie. I just have a headshot of the scientist I was interviewing, so that will go in there. We might find a substitute for that one later, but I'm really proud of that interview, so I want to keep it in. And then lastly, we want to have some information on my research with the spot dog. So I'm just going to quickly find an image from the manufacturer's website, and we can maybe go back and find an image I've actually taken later. This is massive. Okay. So as you can see, it doesn't look great, but we're gonna kind of unify them. So they're all somewhat like similar and pretty easy on the eyes. So here I have rounded edges out of 5. If you can see this particular characteristic, it rounds the edges of the image. That's just something I like to do because I think it looks more aesthetically pleasing. It won't be super helpful for a lot of the images here just because their border is white. But I'm going to do that just in case I want to add a border in the future. And then the next thing I'm going to do is space these out in a way that it's going to be easy to convert to mobile. So since this one's so long, I might center them. I think that might be a good idea. I think having that stretch the entirety might be a good idea. And then we can just have one project going down. I'm still not too happy with this. I am going to move that over and maybe just select a different project or crop this a bit. No, 313 sort of. And then 313, I'm going to crop this so the width is around 400. I don't want them to be like entirely uniform, but I do think that them being around the same size will be useful. All right, that's a little bit better. And in the case of this, I think I'm going to do typically rows of 3, actually 2. If it will, there we go. Then we're moving this to the middle. And we'll have this does not scale as well. It's the height. Okay. There we go. Perfect. Okay. And then I think that I'm going to find a different image as a placeholder for the headshot. I think that'll just kind of flow with like this opening site a little bit better. But in addition to having these images, I'm going to provide a little bit of context just because right now they could be a little bit confusing if you didn't create them with me. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a border. So I clicked on the stroke button and I'll make that, I'm moving it to outside so the border goes outside of the image. I'll make that stroke 10, a little bit smaller. I'm changing my mind again. And we'll do just a standard box. I'm going to send this to the back. And then I'll round the edges as well. Bring this in a little bit. And change this color because I don't like it. Quickly changing it to that. And then adding in a quick little title. Data contextualization toolkit. And then I'll copy over this to this particular one. Gonna have this wrap the text. And then I'll do the same thing to these bottom two. So you can see I still need to crop this a little bit. And then I'll center this again. Wonderful. Vector test, data, visualizations. Okay. And then finally, over here, I'm gonna make the width of this 425. so it quickly fits in here. Just have so here's where the copy comes in. This is like where I'll add some brief context to this wireframe slash like slightly high fidelity prototype. It's not as expansive as you would see on a full-fledged prototype, but has more than like a simple wireframe would. I'm just going to align these very quickly. And then I'll write out copy for 2 of those before I go into about page, because we're just at the halfway point for this stream. So here I'll have a toolkit for journalists to better frame data in articles. A workshop highlighting technology. I think also a good idea for these is to add a date and like a little bit about the technologies used. But next, like I'm gonna walk through kind of like how you do the about copy as well as coding this up. So on the about page, it's going to be relatively simple. I'll just copy over this and then delete all of these pretty quickly. Make this text a lot longer. I'm going to copy over a little about page that I've made earlier to speed this up, and then we can move into the actual coding. Then copying over just like a simple picture. You don't need to include a picture on your portfolio, but sometimes it can add like a nice element of design or just like some visualization pieces. Here we go. This is just pretty much the default picture I use for everything. Just gonna size it down a little bit. And here we have pretty simple about page. As far as the copy, on this, I did a pretty simple one. I walked through kind of like a fun story from like when I was a kid and kind of tied it into like what I'm doing now. So I say, hi, my name is Gabriella. Nice to meet you. I'm happy to meet you. A little bit of background on me. I talked about how when I was younger, I learned about the power of words because I was always reading. And this is how I started learning how to code, because I was writing book reviews and I wanted to change the design of the blog. So I learned like my first lines of HTML and CSS when I was just trying to edit like the WordPress site. And then I tied that into kind of like creating things, web development, data science, and my involvement in hackathon scene. A pretty short bio, but kind of ties everything together. For this particular instance, if I'm trying to highlight data science a little bit more, I would maybe use a story about data in the past and kind of tie that into projects, whereas this one is more focused on kind of communication with technology and web dev. So now that we've kind of like broken out into a few pages of copy and a portfolio, I'm going to walk you through how you would code this up. So I'm going to open up a Replit page and show you how to do that. All right, so if you want to follow along, you can, but I'll be moving relatively quickly through this. And I'll be sharing the code afterwards, so like no need to follow directly along. So as you can see, this is just like the default Replit page. Like once you've logged in, created a new project using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can see a preview of the page over here. It just says hello world and it has this like run on Replit button. I'm going to keep the web preview on the side, even though it's a little bit different than what a normal web page would look like, just so we have that automatic preview and I don't need to toggle between the Replit code editor and like the Replit preview page. The first thing I'm going to do is delete this badge because I don't really want a Replit badge on my portfolio. Nothing against Replit. I just wanted to focus more on my experience, and I haven't worked at Replit before. First thing I'm going to do is add an H1 element and put my name into it. This will show you a header in a pretty like ugly font, to be honest, but it's there, it's bolded, and you can go through a bunch of different fonts and kind of like styling and like sizing with the different header elements. Header elements go all the way from H1 through H6. And kind of a little bit of information on the other things that are on this page already. It's kind of like your starter HTML document. You have the char set, which shows the character encoding. Replit has this nice pop-up that shows you a bunch of information on this. It's pretty standard for HTML pages. A lot of times when you're in something like VS Code, this will like automatically populate as well. This is like something like pretty similar as well. It shows a bunch of like metadata that like you can't necessarily do with like your normal elements. This is just making sure that everything is standard HTML and is viewed properly in your website. And then here we have the title. So if you're ever browsing on the web and you see like at the top of your web page, it says Google, Replit, Discord, dev post, this is the attribute that controls that. So I'm just going to change this to Gabriella's portfolio. Here is the link to the style sheet. This is linking this CSS file to this page. There's not very many things in the CSS file. It's just essentially saying that the HTML will span the entire height and width of the web browser, which is also pretty standard. Here we have the text that's linking the JavaScript to the web page, but right now the JavaScript is empty. I don't think we'll get to any JavaScript in this particular tutorial, but you can oftentimes use it to add an extra level of interactivity to your portfolio. Okay, so now I've kind of like explained everything outside of, I guess, the container elements. So here we have head. This just kind of contains everything in the head of the website, things that aren't being shown directly on the page, whereas the body tags will contain everything that's shown on the web page. And here we have the HTML tags. This is just everything that will be displayed like within the HTML document. So whether it be like the metadata or the title on the web tab or shown on the actual web page. And then everything is encased within this element. But Moving on to kind of showing more things on our website, I'm going to add a few elements. So the first one I'm going to do is H2, and I'm going to have it say something like projects, and then in addition I'll have a nav bar. So this will just contain the navigation for the page. Within that I'll have just two list items that are about and contact. We'll refresh this page. You see that these two list items are popping up as bullet points. If you want to make a list later on, you can do that using this element. I'm just using it to kind of like aid in the design process for this. So after this, the next thing I want to do for my project is move on a little bit farther down to encapsulate everything into a div class. And this will just be one simple row. And this will kind of like be, as like we talked about in the Figma prototype, we had two projects kind of side by side. And I'm going to next bring in some of those images. Let's see if this works. Does not. Okay. I'm going to quickly stop sharing so I can upload those project images I talked about, and then we'll go back to building out the site. All right. So now I'm pulling in one of these images. And as you can see, it's very oversized. I want to change that. And I'll do that using CSS. So here in the CSS file, I'm going to go through a series of rules. This will kind of be uniform and applied to anything that's under this row class and also an image. So here I'm going to do the class of row image. So this rule will be applied to any item that is selected under this particular class and is like the element is image. And I want to change the sizing down to like a reasonable size, but something that's still big enough that you're able to see like how big it's going to be. So I think that I'll do the width at about 30 rem. And then I can refresh the page. As you can see, it's wide enough that you're able to see it very clearly on mobile. If it's on desktop, you'd be able to pretty easily fit two side by side. The next thing I'm going to do is change the border radius to 2 rem, and this is going to add that rounded edge I talked about earlier. As you can see, that's happening. If you're unfamiliar with the rem rule in CSS, this is essentially multiplied by the size of the default font. It's usually 12 or 16 pixel font, and this will just like multiply it by whatever number you put before. So in this case, it would be 30 multiplied by the default font. In this case, it's 2 for like the level, like the degree of which it's rounding the edges. And then after this, now that I've kind of focused on the design a little bit, I want to edit the font, which I'll do very quickly, adding in some font from Google Fonts. I will paste in the URL where you can browse from different Google fonts on the website, but for the sake of time, I'm going to just paste in like that font, so you're able to kind of see the results a little bit quicker. So here we're pasting in kind of like the link to the Google Font API, which allows us to access a lot of fonts that we wouldn't be able to use otherwise. And then I'm also going to paste in the font family rule that you get from the Google Font API. So this is matching it to the font we used in the Figma file. And then I will refresh. And as you can see, everything's been updated. This matches the original font that I was using. I mean, everything's like looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing now. And I'll quickly copy in the font API if you're curious using it on your own. You're able to like browse through a bunch of different fonts here. And after that, what I'm going to do is add that like additional context to those items, and we can kind of replicate that with other projects as we move on. So we'll first do this by adding some additional text below. We'll just have like an H3, and this will be open source in education workshop. And then I'll have a P element, and this will just have some sample text. So we'll put sample description. And we can go through and edit these later once we have some additional time. But as you can see, these aren't grouped together yet. We can do these by just grouping them together with an additional div. And I'll make this class just project. So we'll group all of these together. This doesn't effectively change anything until we add CSS though. So going back to the CSS page, I will change the rule to project. And since I want to change the background color to match that kind of like context box I had made on the Figma file, I'm going to change the background color to this pink we were using over in the prototyping. And refresh. And as you can see there, It's working in the background, but it's a pretty square box. It also cuts off directly at the edges of the image and directly below the text. So I want a little bit of a buffer. So I'm going to add a border of about 2 rem, and we can see what that looks like. All right. Doesn't seem to be making much of a difference. I think I need to actually apply this to the row rule. I think that makes more sense. No, I think I was using the wrong rule. My apologies. So, perfect. Okay. The syntax had escaped me. Usually I will Google things, but as you can see, sometimes you'll need some like additional context. And it'll come to you after a little bit. All right, okay. I see what's happening. So the padding is essentially shifting everything to the left for rems rather than having the desired effect I have of kind of putting the image a little bit, like having it like a little bit of a radius. So there's a few different ways we could change this. The quickest way that I am thinking of would just be to make the image width a little bit, no, okay. I'm gonna make a quick box, I think. Okay, here we go. I figured it out. So essentially what I've done, sorry for the silence, I was referencing W3 schools, which often happens when you're building websites, is I made a like standard width to like define the box, which will work because all of the images are going to be the same width. 100 rem isn't the size we need. I just kind of was testing that out. 50 isn't either. Probably 40 rem would be a pretty good size. And then we can decrease this. Sizing this down. Here we go. Okay. So essentially, what I did was just make a like defined width of 30 rem, so it matches well to the width of the image. And then I added an additional padding of 2 rem, so that there will be a little bit of that margin. I'm sure it could have been achieved with margin as well. This is just like what came to mind and was able to work a little bit quicker. So in addition to having this, I want to have a border radius of 2 rem as well, so that the edges of this context box are rounded. And I think that we can maybe move the padding down just a little bit slightly. It still feels a little clunky. Perfect. I'm being a little particular about that. There we go. Okay, that I like, and I think matches pretty well to what we made in the portfolio or the Figma file earlier, where we were mapping out this. And the next thing we're going to move on to, now that we have this sample project box built out, is the navigation bar and all of the different like items that go along with different pages before we expand it to these like other projects to expand the portfolio. So to do this, we'll have to have the about and contact buttons on the top right, or just like the top in general. So we'll do this by kind of like grouping them together, and we'll add some additional text styling with CSS to make this a little bit easier. And I also want to add some additional links so that we can like have those extra pages. So first I'm going to make an about.html file. So this can be like the about page and then a contact page. On the about page, I'm just going to copy over this sample kind of like top head information so that it's linked to our pages and has all the setup that it needs. And then I will do the same to the contact page. After this, I'm going to add some additional CSS filings to kind of bring everything together and have those like sitting at the top well. So we're going to try and do this with Flexbox, which is pretty widely used with WebDev. So I named it navbar for the class. So we'll start off by just kind of declaring it as like a flex object. And then I'm going to want to justify the content in a certain way. So this will essentially just like have everything to the right. So I'll do flex end. And this isn't having any particular effect on it because I haven't fully implemented everything. And I'll explain kind of like everything after I copy in everything to like maneuver this. briefly changing the element items from list items to unordered list to remove those dots. And then I'm also going to be adding in linking to my other HTML pages. Oh. Fully just deleted all of that. Fun. Okay. And I'll do the same for the contact page. Next thing I'm going to do is change the styling on these so that these items are bolded rather than underlined. And I'll do this by altering the text decoration to none. And this essentially just removes the default text decoration. And I'm going to get a little bit more specific. All right, and I'm going to change the color to something a little bit more fun, like pink, to match this. And I'm going to change the font weight to 700 so that it's a little bit more bold. I think maybe a little bit darker of a color would be a good idea. So I will do that just so you're able to see it with a higher contrast. There we go. I think this might be a quicker way to achieve what I'm looking for. Have float right, and then I think this makes a little bit more sense. All right, so these two are together. This is adding a little bit of spacing in between those two items. And then try this. Display flex. And then I'll have the flex direction be the end. Sorry for the pause, y'all. Trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong with Fluxbox. That's a good point about navbar. I'm going to try moving this up, see if that changes anything. But I think I might also, I can combine my name into one div. I see what the issue is. I'll quite quickly do all of the things that are supposed to be in the nav bar, which are my name as well as like the actual nav bar itself. So my name will serve as a link back to the index file. Adding just kind of like arbitrary elements to group everything into this flex box. I see what the issue is. Okay. We'll Command Z this, and then I'll explain my very stupid mistake. I can't believe I didn't see this until now. So what the issue was, as you can see now, the two items are up in the right-hand corner. They're not perfectly aligned with my name. I'll work on that in just a second. But I was calling navbar as a class rather than an element like I made it to separate it. And because it was reading as a class, like these two, it wasn't like properly like aligning everything. So that was the issue. And because it was literally just a dot, that's why I was not seeing it. It was stuck for a little while. So now what I'm going to do is work on incorporating everything into one like kind of like solitary line very quickly and then we can move on to like adding extra projects. So I know we don't have that much time left. It might honestly be a better idea. We can work through the about page rather than like the semantics of aligning my name with the navigation bar perfectly. So here, I'm just going to have another H1 element. It's just going to say hello. My name is Gabriella. I'm glad to meet you. And we'll do a quick little wave. And then I'm going to bring over the rest of my copy into just a basic P element. Separating this out by paragraphs just to make the styling a little bit easier. So you can see this is there. I am going to change this to H2 just so I can bring over that header I made originally on the index page with my name and the navigation bar, so you're able to get other parts of the website easy. As we can see, that's there. And then I want to kind of select everything a little bit smaller and add in a picture really quick. So I'm going to briefly stop screen sharing so that I can upload an image. All right. And we're not going to do the original image I'd showed you on the prototype just because it was not on my desktop. So I'm just going to paste in this memoji instead. It'll substitute, and then I will make this a little bit smaller. I'm just going to like manually edit it to a size of 20 rem for the width. That did not change anything. Do 10 rem. Or not width. Width. My apologies. For the width, do 5 rem to make it even smaller. Let's see. This is separating the content from the navigation part very quickly with just a div. We'll do about me. Oh, okay. That's too tiny. That's also too tiny. To like 25. Okay. So this was set at a pretty reasonable width. And then I will move on to the next part, which is just a contact page. So as you can see, this is also blank. And then I'll be commenting or bringing over this kind of like staple code. As you can see, that staple code has been brought over. And then I'll make some quick copy for this page. We're going to have an H2 element, which is slightly smaller. And then it's just going to say, if you are interested in connecting, feel free to shoot me an email or connect with me via social media site. You can choose your favorite one. This is pretty short and to the point. You can also add a form if you want to do that. I'm going to change this to be a little bit smaller and add a quick link. This will be a link to an email. You can actually make links to auto route to an email. And you can use this by doing mail to, just do Gabriella@gmail.com, which is not my email. Don't try to email that. And then we'll just do aref equals just do twitter.com, which I believe still reroutes to the actual Twitter site after they rebranded. And as you can see, these are automatically changing to that formatting I had originally. And then I'm going to put the period inside the A, so there's not that weird spacing. Perfect. Okay. So based off of this is kind of like a very bare bones portfolio, but gives you the general idea of how to go about selecting everything and piecing it all together. Like how you can go through and make projects, how to select them, and how to generally make a portfolio. You'll usually spend a lot more time coding up a portfolio if you're going through this whole selection process and then coding it from scratch. But if you're more focused on IT support or building out a portfolio with something with hardware and you don't know HTML and CSS, you can use a template or one of the website builder sites kind of following this like project selection process and then using a different tool to build out your website. The last thing I'm going to do before I move to questions is add one final link. And this is going to be to this Gabriella title. And this is just going to be back to this like slash link, which will be the index file without having that index like after the URL. So this, when you click on it, we'll just go back to the default link rather than, which is the same as index.html. It doesn't look quite as clunky in the URL bar. And like later, I'd probably change Gabriella to be black again. But in this instance, I'm just going to copy over the link as we're nearly out of time. But does anyone have any questions on how to go through building a portfolio? Any questions about the code I walked through? I know it's a little bit fast because of our technical issues, but feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. And if you're interested in going through the slides I shared earlier, you can go to this bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/GHW portfolio 124, and you'll be able to access the slides from today. And then if you're curious about accessing the code from today, I will send that link in chat. Yeah, but if you have any idea like what you are interested in including in your own portfolio, projects you want to build for your own portfolio, like what you're trying to accomplish with your own portfolio, this is a great time to drop those in the chat, or you can check out the code. Thank you all so much for watching. It was a great time in this workshop. If there aren't any questions, I'm going to hop off. I hope you all have a great night. Thank you so much.